Supervisor Jurdy.
Well, we do have new information since in the last month, and that is that we will not be getting a letter from the Attorney General. And so I do think it's appropriate to ask the County Council to work with the CEO to draft a letter in response. And I do hope that that the letter will result in some discussions with the county and the major landowners in the county who are practicing with this, implementing this practice, to discuss, maybe some changes. So,
Is that a motion, sir?
sure, I would move that we direct the County Council to work with the CEO to send a letter to responding to the Mendocino Redwood letter of 2016 and informing them of the vote and inviting them to meet with the county.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Supervisor McCowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And another aspect of this, I know Supervisor Williams has stated that he's been in dialogue with MRC, and which I appreciate, and would hope that process would continue. And not to put anyone on the spot, but to put someone on the spot, I know we have representatives of MRC here today, and I know they had the opportunity during public comment, but I'm curious if they have anything to add to the discussion at this point.
Thank you for the opportunity. John Anderson with Mendocino Redwood Company. Yeah, we would love to see a response from the county in regards to the letter, and are happy to work with the county on that. I'd also like to open it up to any one of the board members to come out on the ground and see what we're doing out there and the lack of fire hazard. I know it's a little counterintuitive, but we love taking people out. I can show you various vintages of tan oak treatment just right up here on Masonite Road. And so I'll leave my card with the clerk, and please feel free to take me up on that. Appreciate it.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Haschek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm unclear about what this letter is supposed to say, besides we want to work with MRC or whatever corporation. So, in my point of view, I would like to see that, in light of not getting the opinion from the Attorney General, we will go ahead with what the people voted with Measure V and start to implement it. And we hope that we can work out an agreement with MRC about how to move forward so it's not punitive or anything like that.
Supervisor McCowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the original reason that we requested an opinion from the Attorney General was there were questions about the enforceability of Measure V, in that is it legal or not legal. So it's great to say we're going to go out and enforce Measure V. I think we should, and we are directing by this motion, County Council to work with the Executive Office on a response. It'd be kind of nice to know what our legal standing is before we commit county resources to enforcing something that, to this point, we don't really have a clear answer. Is it enforceable or not? We've heard a lot of opposing opinion. And also, one thing, and I think Mr. Anderson referred to it, the dead trees don't cause fires. Potentially, a fire could be more intense in some areas, but dead or alive, tan oak burns pretty dang well. So, it's a much more complicated issue than a lot of people may perceive. You could kill every tan oak out there. That doesn't by itself increase fire risk. Potentially it increases intensity of a fire. Although in the 2008 lightning fires, where the fire was ultimately contained, was in an area that had been treated. So now that's, that doesn't imply causality. It just says that there's a lot we probably don't know about fire behavior in relation to this treatment.
Supervisor Williams?
Supervisor McCowan, putting the potential enhanced fire activity argument aside for a moment, say there is a fire through one of these areas, like as this submission depicts. Who will be out there below the dead trees working?
No one. No one will be under those trees. It'd be irresponsible, and you know it.
Gentlemen, I am going to go to County Council. County Council?
Thank you, Chair Brown. So just a comment in terms of timing on this, just for the public's information. We had received, the CEO had received this letter and shared it with us as well. Back in 2016, as was stated, everything was put on hold as we requested the opinion from the Attorney General. I was contacted in August of this year, August 14th of 2018, by Steve Johnson, the attorney for MRC, that specifically asked me to resend this letter from 2016 to each of the Board of Supervisors, and that was done. So I'm just trying to, in terms of the public, why we're suddenly responding to a letter that came to us back in 2016.
Okay. Let's see. Supervisor Williams?
Yeah, my closing thoughts. So the concern the public, some members of the public have, what you just said is no one would be in this area because we know better. So we understand there's a risk there. Well, saying nobody can be in that area means when you have a small spot fire, you have an area that's no longer as defensible as it would have been otherwise. So you do have an increased risk because you're saying the public's response to it is changed as a result of a manufactured hazard.
Gentlemen, we have a motion on the floor,
In a second.
so I'm looking for discussion towards the motion, not going into further debate. Supervisor McCowan?
If I may have one brief response. These aren't the only dead trees in the forest, and in fact, the study by Greg Giusti indicated that the patterns of intentionally killed trees and natural mortality trees, both in their occurrence and in their behavior in fires, was similar. So I don't think it really changes the equation dramatically. And in 2008, in fact, MRC was left to fight the fire on its own lands with its own resources. My understanding, little or no public resources went onto MRC lands.
During the year of the lightning event, is that what you're speaking?
Correct.
Towards? Yeah, absolutely. We were on our own for several days. Supervisor Haschuk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to move forward with this, and I think that MRC and the other companies that are practicing this probably want to move on beyond this practice too, and to move into something that's economically viable for our communities and really supports the use of these trees in a more productive way. And so I support the letter and this motion.
May I ask who made the motion in the second, please?
Dan Jurdy made the motion, and the second was by
Williams.
Supervisor Williams. Okay. So, Supervisor McCowan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I too support sending the letter, and I do think it should attempt to respond, again, with the guidance of County Council, to the legal issues raised. I think it should also accept the invitation of MRC to work closely with them in looking at other options that may be out there. I'm not so sure there's an immediately attainable, more economical approach to this. If there is, I'm sure the company would be the first to accept it. They'd rather make money off of the tan oak than to spend money on it. But I think also part of the letter would appeal to their spirit of community cooperation in light of the fact that 62% of the voters did support this. And maybe there's a middle ground, maybe there's some agreement that can be reached on ways to limit the practice that in areas where it might be most objectionable to the public. You know, maybe there's some way to allow them to still use the practice in areas where it's not, you know, right in the public's face or adjacent to their properties. I think they already try to maintain some distance. Anyway, I'm open to the possibility of what may come out of the discussions.
Supervisor Williams.
I think you're open to the possibility of working together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As always,
So,
we agree.
so perhaps we need to talk about how to set up a forum, invite Mendocino Redwood, Farm Bureau, other small timber companies, and people who are concerned about the practice, and see what we can hash out. And I think giving MRC a chance to explain the financials of why this is difficult for them to implement, and to work with the people, maybe we'll come up with a compromise. How do you, for the supervisors, how do you see that best going? I don't want to create another ad hoc.
How about utilizing your standing committees that we've had going since January 1, and there's been hardly no meetings?
Our standing committees?
Supervisor McCowan?
Well, there's a lot of issues naturally that need to be explored here. I don't know if immediately putting it into a standing committee is the most productive method. Supervisor Williams is in dialogue with MRC, so we are told. I think initially maybe that's a good approach, and let's see what comes of that. And we await further recommendations.
Okay, let's vote by the button.